This episode of The Startup Life is brought to you by People Ready. Startup Nation, you have a lot on your plate. The last thing you need to stress about is finding quality staff or the available work you need to be successful. Save time and headache by working with a trusted staffing partner that meets your everyday needs. People Ready is a national staffing provider with over 600 locations across the country and 30 plus years of experience serving people just like you. They specialize in a variety of industries including retail, manufacturing, logistics, general cleaning, hospitality, construction, and more. People Ready understands that you're busy and on the go. That's where their mobile app, JobStack, comes in. Use the app to place orders or find work 24/7 or wherever you are. And as social distancing continues to change the way we interact with customers, colleagues, and our everyday lives, JobStack provides the ability to find the right temporary workers or work you need while eliminating the amount of physical touch points needed in the staffing process. Visit peopleready.com/startup life to learn more about how you can partner with People Ready.
It's time to be about that life, the startup life. Here's your host, Dominic Lawson.
All right, Startup Nation. So I hope you're ready to receive some value today. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is The Startup Life, the show for entrepreneurs and career-minded professionals. You know, Startup Nation, as we move forward and we're trying to build our companies, we're trying to really get that startup off the ground, you know, a lot of times we sacrifice healthy foods, healthy alternatives. And it's definitely for those of us who are raising kids, we're always trying to get something quick and easy. Those options may not always be the best options for kids, which is why we have the perfect guest for you here on the show today. She is a graduate of the Wharton School with a BS in Economics and an MBA from there as well. She's also quite the foodie. We're going to talk about that a little bit, which is why she is also the co-founder of Nurture Life, a provider of freshly made, nutritionally balanced meals for children on a mission to deliver a healthier world through better nutrition for our kids. She is Jennifer Chow. Chow, how are you, ma'am?
I am doing well today. Thank you so much, Dominic, for having me on.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Definitely glad to have you on. Are you ready to pour some knowledge in the Startup Nation today? Because we can definitely use some.
Absolutely.
All right. So, you know what? First things first, just kind of share your origin story a little bit, if you would, Jennifer.
For sure. So I was born and raised in the Midwest to immigrant parents. My mother was a registered dietitian. And so I grew up in a very food-forward household. We always ate very fresh, nutritionally balanced, minimally processed food. And so from a very early age, I always had a recognition of different types of food, different types of varieties, cuisines, and how important diet is from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. So when I started going to school, I, quickly saw that a lot of my peers, and classmates were eating, very different foods. And in many cases, just a lot of more processed foods, a lot of more snack foods. And I realized, in our country, we have a situation where a lot of times parents have to compromise between, convenience and healthy foods, like you mentioned, at the start of this podcast. And so, as I was in my professional career, I come out of the tech industry. I've been working at a variety of both startups and large Fortune 500 companies. And when I wanted to start my own business, I talked to my partner, who is now my co-founder, and we said, okay, what could we do that, we feel really, really passionate about? And at around the same time, we had our first baby, who is now 8 years old. And we looked around when he first started eating solids at the different options that were available to feed him. And we didn't love the idea of feeding him food that was shelf stable and in many cases older than he was. And so we just started making all of his food from scratch. And when he first started eating solid foods, it was mostly purees. And so steaming, or baking, a butternut squash, and then pureeing it wasn't too difficult, or scooping out an avocado. But as he grew into, self-feeding and was eating, more structured foods, and certainly as a toddler, he was eating essentially mini adult meals. We were finding ourselves spending a lot of time preparing mini adult meals for him, which, as everyone here knows who, cooks from scratch, it can take a lot of time to essentially plan, shop, prep and cook. And so we thought, there's got to be another way. And my co-founder and I had really wanted to start a business together, like I mentioned. And so we thought, what if we started a business that could essentially change the profile of children's nutrition in our country, help address one of the biggest challenges that our country has in terms of how children eat. But then, at the very core level, give parents a solution that would, enable them to not have to compromise between, fresh, healthy food for their kids and something that was also practical and convenient. And that's really how we came up with the idea of starting Nurture Life.
Awesome stuff. I appreciate you sharing all that. I want to ask a quick follow-up because I want to hear more about, you as a kid and some of those early food choices because, you talked about, all the food choices you had, fresh produce and stuff like that as a kid. And it seems like that really did have an impact on you for the rest of your life and your company and your career and your kids and stuff like that. Kind of talk about that and your parents a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love to share, how we ate growing up.
Right.
So both of my parents are Chinese, and from mainland China and Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
And, everything that we made growing up was from scratch. We spent a lot of time over the weekends, going to, Chinatown, going to different produce markets and really looking at all the different types of ingredients, whether it is different types of produce, different types of spices, different types of animal or fish proteins. And so we were always very creative at home in terms of what we were cooking, what we were eating.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that was pretty unique about our family is that my parents engaged my sister and I from a very early age in the process of preparing food, cooking food. And so as a result, it was just something that was always very, very top of mind for us in terms of like how, food gets from, the grocery store, the market, onto a family's table and the process that's involved in cooking it and the process that's involved in choosing a selection that is well balanced in the family that I grew up in. We always had, a really nutritionally balanced dinner, lunch, and to a lesser degree breakfast, but certainly lunch and dinner where we always had, good amount of produce, some sort of protein, a whole grain. And so for our family, it was really important that my sister and I always ate a very balanced diet and that we could be a part of the process, from the start, everything from the selection through the prepping to the cooking. And that's something that, I always really valued. And I think it's what made me become a huge foodie, who loves to cook. And, now we have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. And even our 4-year-old is very involved in the process of preparing and cooking our family's meals.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. We have an 8-year-old here at home, and she probably eats better than us. We start her off on, not necessarily like the foods, but when she was growing up, when she got, instead of like particular, fruit juice or whatever, we gave her like the certain like juices with like different type of fruits and vegetables in it and stuff like that. And now it just has really kind of grown into her now having, making better food choices and stuff like that to the point where now she asks for asparagus and salmon and stuff like that. So I can definitely appreciate your story and how it's really reflected upon you and your career and stuff like that. Let me ask you this. How about those college years? Were you able to kind of continue with that way of life with food? Did you kind of fall off the wagon a little bit? Because I mean, us college students from time to time, we like to indulge in a little pizza every once in a while. So kind of tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, Dominic, I have to say, like, hearing that your daughter, who is 8, asks for salmon and asparagus is absolute music to my ears. I mean, that's so wonderful that she eats so well because, in this country, the vast majority of children, something like 22% of kids get, a serving of vegetables per day. And so, right. The fact that she has this awareness and that she wants to eat, healthy, good foods is just really, really wonderful.
For sure. Appreciate that.
But back to your question about my college years. So I do have a few confessions to make. So while I tend to eat quite healthy, I have a huge sweet tooth. And then I love pasta. And so I would say that during my college years, I try to keep the sweet tooth under control. But
Right.
other than my freshman year, for my sophomore through senior years, I lived off campus in an apartment. And I have to say, like, between studying and activities and, time with friends and things like that, I probably made way too much pasta with, various types of sauces, and wasn't necessarily as balanced as I should have always been. But yeah, my college years were definitely very, very dominated by a lot of fast pasta cooking.
For sure. Look, when I was in college, I think we've all been there when we were in college, stuff like that. So I definitely understand that. One too many runs to Domino's and stuff like that. So I definitely understand that for sure. Startup Nation, we're talking to Jennifer Chow, the co-founder of Nurture Life. So I want to ask you this because, with everything going on right now and COVID and stuff like that, I know in the food space, there's been a bit of a supply chain issue in getting food and stuff like that. Have you experienced that at Nurture Life or anything like that? Kind of talk about that experience a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So we've experienced it both from the procurement or the sourcing side of things,
Right.
and then also directly with our customers.
Mm-hmm.
So on the sourcing side of things, so we use incredibly high quality ingredients in
Right.
all of our meals, and we're very, very strict about our quality standards. So we, always focus on organic produce, antibiotic and hormone-free proteins, and whole grains. And so one of the things that we experienced as a business at the start of the pandemic was, definitely shortages, especially in the beef and pork supply chain,
Right.
and also escalating prices. And so our procurement team has really been amazing since the start of COVID. But they worked very, very quickly on, secondary and tertiary suppliers, making sure that they met all of our standards. And then also, in many cases, what we saw escalating prices. Like, I think the price of our beef ended up being 3 times the price of our pork, ended up being 2 times. And what we decided to do is we obviously would never compromise on the quality of the product.
Of course.
So we made sure that we were sourcing a very high quality product, even though we were sourcing it at double and triple the prices. And what we decided to do was to not pass on the cost to our customers, because obviously our customers, who are families throughout the United States, were experiencing so many different types of hardships and changes due to COVID that the last thing we wanted to do was to pass on escalating prices to them.
Gotcha.
On the customer side, we are a subscription service, and so
Right.
many of the families who purchase Nurture Life meals for their families have been with us for many years. And, what we were finding is that so many families, they are counting on us now more than ever, especially given the fact that, social distancing measures in place and also wanting to avoid trips to the grocery store. And so
Right.
what we were finding is that so many customers were reaching out to us and asking us, like, do we anticipate having, any issues in terms of, being able to source, being able to fulfill orders, being able to get their deliveries to them, in a timely manner on schedule. And so we have done as a business everything that we can to, mitigate any risks that we have to make sure that we're able to fulfill our customers' orders at this time when they're counting on us more than ever.
For sure. For sure. Thank you for sharing that. And you know what? I want to ask, a quick follow up, because Startup Nation, we're obviously experiencing this thing, this global pandemic, and a lot of business owners are making tough decisions. And Jennifer, you said something, you just said 2 things actually that kind of stood out, and it really speaks to leadership. The first one was not passing on that cost to the customer because, customers are having a hard time as it is and stuff like that, but also not sacrificing on the standards that you set for Nurture Life. Kind of talk about why that's important, because I think Startup Nation needs to hear this part as far as like why that's important, not to relinquish on standards, but also that decision to not pass the cost on to the customer, because you could have easily have done that, to be honest with you.
Yes, we could have. We
Right.
definitely could have.
Right.
And, we've certainly heard of a lot of customers or companies, as we all have, who have made a decision to pass on the cost to the customers.
Right.
So to address that directly, we as a business take our relationships with our customers so to heart in everything that we do. And we just felt that, while so many families are experiencing so many hardships, whether it is, financial hardships to, parents that are, now transition from working out of the home to working at home, homeschooling and parenting all at the same time. There's just so much more hardship and stress that families are experiencing. The last thing that we wanted to do was add the additional burden of having, an escalated cost in terms of how they're feeding their kids, because the families who use us, like they care so much about the quality and the nutritional value of what they're feeding their kids. And it's an area that we have heard over and over from families that, they don't want to sacrifice on how they're feeding their kids. And they turn to Nurture Life because they have, really crazy busy lifestyles. They don't have the time to do it all themselves. And so the last thing we wanted to do was, potentially take that away from them by, increasing the costs of our meals, because the costs of our ingredients or our food costs were escalating.
Gotcha.
So that was super important to us. Right. And then, to your other question around standards. So when Steve, my co-founder, and I founded this business, we always said that we would never create any product that we couldn't, not only stand behind, but feel really, really proud to have the Nurture Life name and our names behind it. And to always, exactly. And to always produce products that, parents could be proud to serve. And so from literally the beginning of the business, we created what we called our nutrition bands. These are nutrition standards. And we also created ingredient guidelines in terms of, what our standards were across all of the meals that we produce and all of the ingredients that we source. And, we feel very strongly that, once you create these standards, like you have to stick to them. Right. It's something that, not only do we believe in, but we have to be proud of what we're doing. And we have to be able to say to our customers every day, that when they make the choice to choose Nurture Life, like we're consistently providing the best meals for their kids, and that there is no compromise, and that we're not willing to make compromises on that. And our customers have told us time and time again that they trust us when we, provided a product or we create a new meal or whatever it may be, that they trust that it is going to be very, very well thought through, developed by registered dietitians and chefs, only contain the best ingredients, and be nutritionally balanced. And so it's something that we just feel so strongly about, and something that we would never change or compromise.
Jennifer, thank you so much. And I appreciate that answer. And I'm going to tell you why, because a lot of times, Startup Nation, when we're founding businesses, right, and we're on our startup journey, we're on our entrepreneurial journey. I mean, true enough, the business is in the business of making money, but there are some businesses out there, and Nurture Life definitely fits that mold. There are some businesses where it means a little bit more, right? Jennifer talks about that kind of contract, that trust, if you will, with their customer and their client base. And so, because the thing is, they're putting food on American family tables, and that's super important. And that's not only important from a business standpoint, it's important from a humanistic standpoint. You're feeding America. That's super important. And so, Jennifer, I appreciate your transparency and your honesty about that.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for recognizing that. I really appreciate it.
No worries. So Startup Nation, when you go to nurturelife.com, we have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you listen to the replay on the podcast, or if you're driving and listening to radio and stuff like that. When you go on the website, you can see that the onboarding process is very simple. It even shows you how the process works. So Jennifer, for those who are not able to, they're driving down and are on the way to work and they can't really click in the show notes, kind of share with Startup Nation how the process works. How does that onboarding to the subscription model works for Nurture Life?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And we certainly have a lot of families that are constantly on the go. Right. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to design, our site to make it as easy as possible for families to both sign up, but also to manage their subscriptions. So the way that the sign up process works is families go to nurturelife.com, which is just nurturelife.com. And they can either go directly to our menu to select products from a variety of different categories, or they can get assistance by clicking Get Started, in which case we will help a customer or family build their box. So in terms of the Nurture Life offering, the whole idea behind our service is that we want to provide meals for all ages and stages of development. So we start at what we call baby stage 3. It's when a baby first starts to self-feed. So typically around 10 months old. And what those are essentially like diced up finger foods. So we would have anything from like a chicken, meatballs, and pasta to something, more varied along the lines of for example, egg bite sausage and sweet potato. And then we go into the toddler, kid, and teen and adult years. And we separate by portion size. So we have meals for toddlers, so 1 to 4-year-olds, kids 5 to 12-year-olds, and then teen and adults 13 and up. And we have 20 varieties of meals for toddler, kids, teens, and adults. So everything from your meals that are more classic kids' favorites for, say, for example, for picky eaters. So if we were to we have a mac and cheese, but whenever we have a classic kids favorite or a picky eater favorite, we always do it what we call the Nurture Life way. So we'll always be nutritionally balanced. And what we mean by that is that it always has a full serving of vegetables. It always has the required amount of protein, and it will have whole grain. So in the case of our mac and cheese, it has, say, for instance, a full serving of vegetables blended in with cauliflower. If we have like a chicken meatballs meal, it will have a side of broccoli and cauliflower, as well as a whole grain rotini noodle and tomato sauce. So we always try to make sure that we always get that balance. And for toddler, kids, teens, and adults, we have everything from like picky eater favorites to much more adventurous meals like a teriyaki salmon or a chicken biryani. And then we also offer for families who need something that's more on the go for their kids who are attending school. We have a cold lunch offering because one of the things that we got a lot of feedback from families is that they're constantly spending a lot of times in the morning scrambling to get their kids out of the door. They don't have the time to pack a balanced, fresh lunch. Right. And so we have an offering that's a cold lunch that could just literally be taken out of the fridge, put straight into a lunch box with a little cooler pack, and then the kids can go to school and just eat it directly out of the lunch box. And then we also have shareable family meals. And so essentially when a family goes to our site, they can choose from all the different product categories based off of their family's needs. And then they essentially go through the process of signing up for the service. And so once they choose the meals, then they can check out. And then after they check out, they can decide, okay, do I want to choose my meals every week? Do I want to get the same meals that I've already selected every week? Or in many cases, we have the majority of our families actually choose what their preferences are. So they could choose, say, for instance, if they have, a baby who is self-feeding, they can choose 3 baby stage 3 meals. And then if they have a toddler, they can choose, 5 toddler meals. Maybe they want to share a family meal once a week, so they can choose 1 main and 1 side. And then they could also select if they have any dietary preferences, allergens, and if there are specific meals they always want to include, always want to exclude. And then the way that our system works is it will essentially select the meals for them based off of what they've entered as their preferences. And then they can always choose to get those meals or to change those meals before the cutoff period where they then finalize their order and it gets prepared. Everything is made to order and then shipped to the customer the following week. So we try to make it very flexible for families and really have our service and our products be able to be selected in a way that it works best for families.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing all of that. Jennifer, I want to ask you this because, as our conversation progresses and I'm looking on the website and I'm looking at the blog and Startup Nation, you can check out that blog we have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you listen to the replay on the podcast. I think educating the customer and guiding the customer is so important. And we see many different ways how businesses kind of educate the customer. And when I think of food, one particular Netflix documentary comes to mind where it's a little scary and stuff like that. But yours is more like just like the company itself. It's of a nurturing type. Kind of talk about the importance of educating the customer, educating the client, and really kind of guiding them to help them make informed decisions of for the product that you provide.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're big believers that, in addition to providing a great product for families to feed their children, we're also big believers that, we have a tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise through our registered dietitians, the pediatricians we work with, to really help guide parents when it comes to their children's food journey, whether, their children are just starting to eat solids all the way through tackling, the picky eater toddler years to, making sure that, if you have a really active kid or teen, that you're able to make sure that they're nourished, in the most nutritious way, with the levels of, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, et cetera, that they need to lead a very active lifestyle. And so we do it in a variety of ways. So the first is, Dominic, like you noticed, we have a blog. So we have a blog that essentially covers a variety of topics when it comes to feeding children. So everything from nutrition to picky eating to, different tips and how-tos. And for example, like one of the things that we get asked about all the time from our families is, I have a picky eater. What do I do to help, get my child to be willing to eat a more, varied diet? And so we have a variety of blogs on picky eaters, everything from, how to gradually, introduce your child to, different types of varieties and cuisines of meals to, how do you overcome like the top challenges with picky eating to, what is the connection between fast food and picky eating? And so the idea is that we want to provide a resource to families on how to help not only understand your picky eater, but how to help you overcome picky eating. And, a lot of times one of the challenges that we hear from parents is that they recognize when they have a challenge or an issue with their children and feeding, but a lot of times they just don't know where to start. And so one of the things that is unique about Nurture Life is that our registered dietitians, have worked with, our customers. And at this point, we have thousands and thousands of customers. They've heard so many different scenarios and they've really worked to guide our customers on how to overcome a lot of the different challenges that exist when it comes to children's eating. And so having these resources that have been written to really help families is something that, we consistently hear from not only our customers, but just, families that have happened upon the blog that, they follow these tips and it really helps them understand like how to tackle something like, say, for instance, picky eating, how not to get frustrated, how, one of the, really critical stats around picky eating is that it can often take between 7 and 14 tries for a child to grow to like a new food. And so much of it is based off of familiarity. And for families to know that, not only has this been seen before in many, many children, but we can provide them with the tools and the resources to help overcome it. That can be incredibly comforting, but also empowering in terms of what to do next. The other thing that we do to help families is we have registered dietitians on staff, and many of our customers contact us to speak to our registered dietitians and have them help, guide them, whether, a perfect example is we had, just last week, a child who has eating issues and is not on the weight charts based off of their current level of, age and development. And our registered dietitians help really kind of talk through the parents in terms of like, okay, this is what you need to do in terms of calorie count. This is what you need to do, in terms of protein, frequency of eating, all of those types of things to really help families overcome and tackle some of the challenges that they have when it comes to their children and nutrition.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And, I didn't even know that part about, that families can contact the dietitian. I think that's kind of a unique factor that, you don't really see from a lot of, companies in the food space. So I appreciate you sharing that. But I actually want to ask a follow-up, and it's kind of related to the dietitians because I know a lot of times when we build teams in a company, everybody has expertise and different things and stuff like that. And so I want to ask you about how you rely on those dietitians or rely on other parts of your team to kind of make decisions? Because the reason I'm asking, because I came across an article where you was in Women in Wellness Authority magazine, where you talked about maybe sometimes in the company you were a little bit too collaborative. So kind of walk me through that, the collaboration versus to, standing firm on what we need to do and collaborate with dietitians and stuff like that.
So in terms of our registered dietitians, so we do believe very strongly in having all of our meals developed in collaboration with our registered dietitians and as well as our chefs. We feel very strongly that, our registered dietitians have, developed the guidelines for all of the meals in terms of the nutritional balance, in terms of the, the types of ingredients, the mix of ingredients, that are important to have and the right macronutrient and micronutrient balance, which is so critical, to children's development, especially at a very early stage. And
Right.
So we just believe so strongly that, by having registered dietitians and chefs work together in the development of all of our meals, we can, ensure that our meals not only taste great and are really, really delicious to kids, but they also are serving the purposes that they need to serve from a nutritional perspective, and that, they're, that the calories that we're providing through our meals really, really count. And so for us, that's why we have registered dietitians heavily involved in, our development process from the very beginning.
Gotcha. I guess what I'm curious about as far as like, because I know sometimes like dietary, things or things that, people who are on the front lines from the food standpoint may conflict with the business side and stuff like that. So I was curious about like how sometimes maybe that conflict arises a little bit, if you don't mind me asking.
Yes, you can absolutely ask that.
Right.
So the greatest conflict that does arise is between taste acceptance and nutrition standards.
Okay.
Within the company. So one of the things that is really, really challenging in our country is that, we have a children's food industry that has produced, food for decades now that is just very high in sodium, in sugar, in fat, and more empty calories than, what our children should be eating. And so a big challenge that we have is that, children in our country have become accustomed to eating a certain type of food and craving that type of food. And as a business, like we founded this company to take a completely different approach to feeding kids and to, completely, change the standard of kids' food in our country. And so, we're constantly battling you have a family, they have a child, the child is a picky eater. The child, say for instance, and this is actually a real example, eats pancakes for breakfast, eats mac and cheese every single day for lunch,
Right.
and eats only chicken bites for dinner. And very, very little veg. And so on the one hand, we want to help that family eat, have their child eat a much more balanced meal. But on the other hand, they're so accustomed to eating a certain type of food, and they're so accustomed to having that food typically be high in salt, high in sugar, high in fat, that to get them to eat something that is nutritionally balanced, that when they eat lunch or when they eat dinner, when they eat breakfast, that it has, produce beyond fruit, that it has veggies, that it has whole grains and not more of the less nutritious carbs, that, it has lean protein, and the lean protein isn't necessarily fried or breaded or whatever it may be,
Right.
can be really, really challenging. And so for us, while it is a challenge, we also see it as a huge opportunity. So we have a team of registered dietitians and chefs who just are very, very creative in making sure that we stick to our standards, that we never compromise when it comes to our nutrition standards, but that we can still make food that is really, really appealing and delicious to kids. And you'll absolutely find with our meals that, they're not nearly as sweet. They're not nearly as salty. They're not nearly as high in fat, not even close to
Right.
what is typically available from the kids' food industry, or what we mostly see on the market when it comes to a lot of shelf-stable and frozen kids' food. And so in many cases, it does take time for kids that are used to that type of diet to become used to and accustomed to Nurture Life meals. Because in many cases, like we've had families tell us, that with our meals, it's the first time their child has ever eaten salmon. It's the first time their child has ever eaten edamame. It's the first time their child has eaten sweet potato, and so it's one of those things where it does take time, right? But it's something that can absolutely be accomplished because, again, like with children, it's all about familiarity. Like they crave what they're familiar with when it comes to eating. And so for families, if they really stick with providing their kids more varied foods, making sure that they always have veggies on every plate, that there's balance in the meals, their kids will start to get accustomed to it and eventually grow to love the real foods the way that your daughter, asks for salmon and asparagus.
All right, Startup Nation. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We got to pay some bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you're listening to The Startup Life. This fresh coat of the Startup Life has been sprayed on nice and smooth by Wagner and the Flexo series of paint sprayers. Startup Nation, my wife decided she wanted to rehab her childhood home. The goal was to fix it up and invite a nice family to rent it out. We knew one of the biggest jobs we had to undertake was painting. However, from the walls, the cabinets, and even the siding outside, it was going to be a big task. As entrepreneurs with a company to run, we knew this was going to take up a lot of our time, which is why we decided to get a paint sprayer. And after much research, we decided to go with the sprayer from the Flexio series from Wagner. Startup Nation, these sprayers are top-notch because of its flexibility to paint or stain walls, furniture, cabinets, and more. It's 10 times faster than using a paintbrush, which was a big selling point for us. And you can paint or stain right from the can. It's also easy to clean in 5 minutes, and being great for indoor and outdoor projects, a paint sprayer from the Flexio series clearly needs to be part of the arsenal in your garage. So if you're ready to stain your deck, or like me, fill your daughter's request of a bubblegum pink room, up your game with a paint sprayer from the Flexio series by Wagner. Take it from me, your time will thank you. This episode is sponsored by Swanson Health. Startup Nation, Swanson Health has been producing quality vitamins and supplements, foods, healthy home, and self-care products for over 50 years. Since 1969, from the heart of America, Swanson Health carries over 20,000 wellness products at a great value. Pick up all of your favorite health products, plus discover new ones for your wellness routine, all while leaving money in your pocket. If you want to try any of Swanson Health's great products for yourself, use code STARTUP20 for 20% off at swanson.com. We have a link there in the show notes if you listen to the replay. This episode of The Startup Life is powered by Colony Spark. Startup Nation, with our economy in flux, there is a lot of mixed messaging out there. If there was ever a time to take control of the narrative and let your customers know that you're here to serve them, it's now. And that's why you have a friend in Colony Spark. Colony Spark is an omni-channel marketing agency that believes in the power of community to ignite your business. They have helped companies across many industries with lead generation, revenue growth, and more to put them on the path to success. My guy Bill Murphy and his team are very good at what they do. How do I know this? Because not many SEO companies have the stamp of approval of being partnered with Google. Yes, that Google. So I want you to go to www.colonyspark.com/startup to schedule a meeting today. In that meeting, you will review your current marketing activity, receive actionable advice on how to pivot and grow, and ask any marketing questions you may have on navigating over the next few months. Look, Startup Nation, I know things may seem uncertain right now, but if you are looking for a business partner that can help light the way, go with Colony Spark, where they firmly believe in business helping business. All right, Startup Nation, welcome back as we continue our conversation with today's guest here on The Startup Life. One of the things I appreciate about you, Jennifer, is that you're not referring to your client base as clients. You're referring to them as families. And that seems like a constant and very intentional thing with you. So I want to ask you this. Talk about the culture there at Nurture Life a little bit, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So I would say in terms of the business and the team, we definitely have a team that is incredibly passionate about food and the state of childhood nutrition. So one of the requirements that my co-founder Steve and I have is that everyone who works at Nurture Life has to be passionate about food and passionate about children's nutrition.
Gotcha.
And so I would say, at the very least, you have a team that is incredibly passionate beyond, just, getting their work done and getting a paycheck. It's all about, the mission of the business and really changing the profile of children's nutrition in our country. And so you just have a team that's very, very passionate, very focused on that. But I would also say, we have a very friendly team. While the team is very driven and hardworking, in terms of from a culture perspective, our team likes to be together. They're very collaborative. They're very friendly. A lot of our team members, pre-COVID would socialize and get together a fair amount outside of work. And so it's just, I've always wanted, and so has my co-founder, to create a very positive environment where, our team members get up and they want to come to work and they want to be with each other. And, so I would say that while our team is, very passionate, very focused on, what it is that we're doing every day, it's also a very friendly and very collaborative work environment.
Startup Nation, if you want to start the path with Nurture Life, go to the show notes. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access, nurturelife.com. And Jennifer, I do believe you have a promo code or something for us today.
We absolutely do. Thanks so much for mentioning, Dominic.
No worries.
For the Startup Life listeners, they can get 25% off their first order with code STARTUP, all one word.
Awesome stuff.
And I was just going to say, we would love to have, all the listeners on this podcast today try us. We are always super, super proud of the products and the meals that we deliver to customers. And, we would absolutely love to have your family try us with the promo code STARTUP.
Absolutely. And Startup Nation, that promo code is there in the show notes for easy access. Remember, promo code STARTUP, all one word. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for that coupon. We really appreciate that.
Of course.
So I want to ask you this, because you're in a space where, it's highly competitive. Let's be honest. So
it is.
It absolutely is. And and it seems like there's somebody jumping in the space almost every day. So kind of talk about, where you see yourself in the marketplace and also, where do you see yourself maybe a couple of years down the road within the marketplace? Yeah.
So in terms of where we see ourselves in the marketplace today, so we are the largest direct to consumer, Better For You Kids brand right now.
Right.
So we definitely see within the market, the reason why we started the business is just this huge opportunity to create, kids meals that, are, good for kids, that are better for kids, that, don't compromise at all when it comes to ingredients and nutrition. And so that really is our place in the market, is to provide the best meals for families, to feed their kids.
For sure.
And that's something that obviously we take incredibly seriously. As we continue to grow and evolve, we consistently get asked by our families to expand what it is that we're offering. So one of the things that we hear all the time is that, when we have a product for our families trust what it is that we're offering, and they want to see more. Like, they want to see more cold lunches. They want us to, to start providing breakfast. They want us to provide snacks. And so as we continue to evolve, we're looking to essentially introduce, more what in the food industry is called day parts. So essentially being able to provide, families with healthy, protein-rich breakfast for their kids, to provide more cold lunches or grab-and-go lunches, to be able to provide, healthy snacks for kids that are, either active and need something to, to tide them over between meals, or, for families that are just looking for, a healthy, protein-rich, potentially veggie-infused snack to feed their children. So we're really looking to, to continue to expand what it is that we're offering families for their kids.
Got you. Thank you for sharing that. And also to just kind of, a follow up to that question, because, like I said, it's a very competitive space, but I want to ask you this. let's say somebody wants to partner with Nurture Life, whether that be another company, whether that be like a school system, because I know a lot of times when we have this conversation about, food choices for kids, a lot of times school lunches, that becomes a topic of great debate and discussion and stuff like that. So let's just keep it simple. How about a school system, right? So let's say a school system wants to partner with you and stuff like that. What would that potential conversation sound like to you?
Yeah. So for us, we would be, we would absolutely welcome partnering with a school system.
Right.
What we would need to understand is, and this is probably going to be too logisticy, but we would
Right.
need to understand, the size of the school system, the ages of the children that they're serving, the types of dietary preferences and allergens that need to be met, what type of day parts they're interested in. Are they interested in breakfast and lunch? Or are they interested in like breakfast, lunch, and snack? What types of varieties they're looking at? Right now, when it comes to healthy kids meals, like we do have the largest selection and largest number of varieties on the market. So, I think we certainly could, partner really, really well with the school system, but it's a lot of those upfront logistics that we would need to understand, and then certainly understand like what are the nutritional requirements per meal. It's typically done per meal or per serving for schools, and then go from there.
Got you. Thank you for sharing that for sure. I want to ask you about your boys a little bit, because I know they're making healthy food choices and stuff like that. But what are some of those healthy activities like sports or playing and being active and stuff like that? What are some of those things you're doing with them these days, Jennifer?
Yeah. So things have changed a little bit
right,
with, certainly with the pandemic.
Right.
So we have gotten at the beginning of the pandemic, we started getting really into bicycle riding. So we go on 10 to 15 mile bicycle rides with our 8-year-old and our 4-year-old. So we'll go all up and down the lakefront, through the city, through different, trails. But our boys are really, 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 really into bicycle riding. Our 4-year-old is really little and can't ride. He rides his own bicycle with training wheels, but
right.
he can't go that far.
Right.
So one of the things that we've done is we got an addition to my bicycle that essentially is a seat with wheels and handlebars.
Oh,
so he pedals along. Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And so we can go on these like multi-hour, 10, 15 mile bike rides with our kids. We also spend a lot of time outdoors with our kids. So we have in our building, there's a large backyard area. So we play baseball, we play soccer, we kite fly. We just try to do a lot that's outdoors where we're running around with them. They're active. They actually love being outdoors and being active, especially now that it's the summertime in Chicago. So we pretty much try to do whatever it is that we can with them outdoors where they're able to be really active. But we're lucky in the sense that they love being outdoors and they love running around. And so it's pretty easy to get them, motivated to go outside and to do something.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you this and sticking with, talking about your boys a little bit, because I know your mom, you talk about she was a dietitian and stuff like that. And she actually kind of had a business herself a while back, correct?
That is correct.
Right,
yes.
right. Okay. So she had a business. So you were able to see her as an entrepreneur and build a business and stuff like that. And now your boys are seeing that from you. Talk about how important it is for them to see your startup journey, to see you as a businesswoman moving forward.
Yeah, I think for children, or at least for our children, we do feel that it's really important to, inspire them. So not only to be good people and to want to make a positive contribution to society,
of course,
but also, to some degree, give them a real life example of it. So one of the things, our 4-year-old is pretty young, but with our 8-year-old, he definitely has been able to see like what hard work, what dedication does. He's seen Nurture Life ever since the very beginning of it.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's, when he comes to the office, or he comes to, we have our own production facility that's pretty large.
Right.
And when he comes to the production facility, he meets all the team members. He's, he really is able to internalize what it means to, be dedicated, to have a vision, to start something, and to really, focus on watching it grow. And so, so we definitely feel very privileged to have shown him that.
Right.
The other thing that I think is wonderful for young children to see is, just this idea of, wanting to make a positive contribution, whether it is starting a business, employing team members, giving them a livelihood, which is super, super important to us, or being able to, try to create a business where, you're in many cases changing, the way families feed their children. And,
right.
We get a ton of families who tell us that, our meals have completely changed, the nutritional profile, the medical profile, the cholesterol profile, whatever it may be, of their children. And, and sharing those stories with our sons, or letting them, in the case of our 8-year-old, read some of the, the feedback we get from customers. He really starts to think about, okay, when I grow up, what do I want to do? What do I want to do that can, really help people and make a positive impact on society? And so, I certainly saw that with my mom, who started her own business, like
right.
you mentioned. And, we're certainly trying to do that with our young boys as well.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that as well. Once again, Startup Nation, we're wrapping up with Jennifer Chow, co-founder of Nurture Life. And once again, if you want to start your Nurture Life journey, make sure you go to the show notes. We have a link there for easy access. If you're listening to the replay on the podcast, enter promo code STARTUP, all one word, to get it was 25% off, correct? On your first order?
Absolutely. Yes. That is correct.
Yeah, 25% off on your first order, Startup Nation. So make sure you check that out for sure. Jennifer, what's your entrepreneurial superpower and why?
Oh, that's such a good question. I would say, I don't know if this is a good entrepreneurial superpower. I would say work ethic.
I hear that.
So one of the things that my mother instilled in me is that, I'm never going to be the smartest person in the room, but I can always work the hardest, have a really, really strong work ethic.
Love that.
And always be willing to go the extra mile, to do all the preparation work that's needed to accomplish something, to mitigate risk, all of those types of things. And so I would say probably my entrepreneurial superpower is work ethic. I've always had a very strong work ethic.
I hear that. Not everybody has that. So I definitely understand that. And I definitely agree with you for sure. Once again, just want to say, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate your content and your knowledge that you've shared with Startup Nation. But I'm actually going to turn the microphone over to you because given everything going on, there's a lot of startup founders and entrepreneurs that are having a tough time right now. Give us some words of encouragement to take us out for today, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I would say that's another really, really good and really tough question. The first thing I would say is that, a lot of people, there's a quote that says, it's lonely being a founder. And while I would say it absolutely is, I would say part of the reason for it being lonely is that a lot of founders aren't comfortable really kind of talking about the experiences that they're having or the struggles that they're having. So I would say the first thing is, to not be hesitant to talk to people that you trust and that you value about your experiences. And, whether it is to, get advice, whether it is to, just vent, whatever it may be, a lot of times you can, benefit certainly from sharing your experience and getting advice. But also if you just need somebody to vent to, if you just need to commiserate or somebody to commiserate with you, it could certainly make you feel better. Because it is tough, especially at a time like this, when we're going through the pandemic and then there's so much challenge, economically, in the world today. So I would say that would be the first thing. The second thing is if you are passionate about something, if you, really, really believe in what you're doing, to not give up. Like you will always have a ton of challenges, a ton of obstacles thrown in front of you. But it's so important if you're really, really passionate, if you really believe in what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish, to really stick with it. Give it a go. Don't give up. because the fruits of doing something that you really believe in and building something is so incredibly valuable. And, so much of the innovation that happens in this world happens because people are willing to take a risk and to try something different, or have a vision or have an idea and really stick with it and try to see it to fruition. And so I think it's so incredibly important to do that.
I hear that. Awesome stuff. And that's going to wrap up this session of The Startup Life. We want to thank once again the co-founder of Nurture Life, Jennifer Chow, for coming on the show. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dominic, for having me on today. It's really been a pleasure to speak with you.
No worries. And as always, Startup Nation, if you have an idea, be about that life, The Startup Life. If you want to let us know what you think about our show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a great way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is there in the show notes. Subscribe to the show, as it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or even on your Facebook timeline or any other platform you like to get your podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. You can also listen to the show on the Startup Life Podcast new website. There you will find the all-new startup blog, where I write on many topics that are interesting and helpful to you on your path to entrepreneurship. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the startup life.